listening to Living with ADHD and CPTSD, available on Apple and wherever you get your podcasts. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Living with ADHD and CPTSD. Today I have a guest on my show. Her name is Anna and she is an ADHD coach who also has ADHD, and she works with adults so that they can have more success at work without working harder. Anna, thank you for coming on the show. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here with you.
Yeah. So why don't you tell the audience about yourself, what you're doing, and the purpose of it, so that for adults with ADHD.
Yeah. So should I start by explaining what an ADHD coach is? Because I know not
Absolutely.
everybody may have come across this idea. So an ADHD coach is someone with knowledge about ADHD and about effective coaching. And so a coach's role really is to help you figure out what your goals are, kind of create that space where you can get in touch with what you really want, stripping away maybe the noise of what other people say, and really figure out what you want. And then we make a plan for the actions that you need to take to achieve those goals, right? That's coaching in general.
Yeah.
ADHD coaching, we understand the challenges of ADHD. And in particular, ADHD makes it really hard to go from having a plan in mind to acting on that plan. We forget to follow through. We know everything that we need to do, and then we forget to actually do it. So it's working with those challenges, as well as, things like setting healthy boundaries, which tends to be a challenge for most of the people I've worked with. Working on that core self-compassion after, growing up hearing more negative words than non-ADHD children tend to. Sometimes we really need to work with clients on their self-compassion for them to really feel like they deserve to have goals and dreams for themselves, not for other people, to kind of help that process happen effectively.
Excellent. Well, that's good. I know that in Canada, I did some research in looking for some ADHD coaches, just as for myself, because I was looking for one. And where I live in Alberta, there were actually only 2 in the province that at the time. So there weren't a lot of them. And which is too bad, because I know that there's a great deal of demand for people who have a lot of expertise and knowledge and understanding of ADHD. And I can imagine there's so many people out there that would love that opportunity to be able to have someone who can guide them and help them through struggles, and when they're not exactly, they don't necessarily know how to handle something or what to help when it comes to adapting or to making some changes to ease the day-to-day life with ADHD. And that would be like, that's your role, more or less, is to help show them and give them a guidance or assistance to make their lives a little easier. And the fact that you, of course, have ADHD as well, it's like a firsthand knowledge, like being, I know exactly what you're going through. Here's a way to help yourself so that it's so much easier instead of struggling and having so much stress in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And, because I have ADHD myself, I'm never going to be judging my clients for the fact that they might find it difficult to respond to feedback. They might struggle to, be organized and do the things they said they were going to do. All of that stuff you've got to find a coaching relationship where you can be really honest and vulnerable with your coach. That the quality of that relationship is the biggest factor that determines whether it's going to be really successful or not so successful. And I've had moments myself where I've been sat in therapy and I felt judged, right? And you shut down and you're not listening to anything, and you're just like trying to hide away and protect yourself. And that's totally counterproductive to therapy, coaching, anything. They're different, but judgment is the opposite of either. And so, because I have ADHD, I will not be judging anybody for the ADHD things that we do, because I get it, right? I've been there.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Now, what would you say when I'm sure you've had quite a lot of clients that have come in and since you've been doing this, what would you say would be the most like if you were to say you had I'll just say 100 people in a year or two, a couple of years, what would you say would be the most common thing that they say is holding them back, or that is making them hesitant to want to have a coach? Like, what do we say is making them kind of, not immediately just say, yeah, I want to do this?
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, it's feeling like they don't need special treatment or they don't deserve special treatment. And there's this sense of like, I've muddled through up until now. Yeah, I'm about to have a nervous breakdown because I'm so overstressed. Yeah, I'm watching people get promoted past me, even though they're my ideas that they're implementing. But I've managed up until now, because we get used to being stressed and we get used to just kind of surviving. And we go, well, I'm managing, I'm coping. And the reality is, only just, right? And you deserve so much more. You deserve to be succeeding on a bigger level and not exhausting yourself in the process. But it starts to feel normal. Being stressed, being overworked, being just on the edge of coping can start to feel normal. And so people are like, well, do I really need to change this? Maybe I can just keep going for another year.
Right. So they almost, it's kind of like they have a hard time admitting to themselves that some help would be a great deal of benefit. So they want to try and push on their own rather than get help, because it's like almost like a fear. There's fear involved.
Yeah, I know that your podcast is also about trauma. Most neurodivergent people, that I work with, almost all have some form of trauma, different forms. Yeah. But one very common response to trauma is this fierce independence, right? It's hard to admit that you need help. That involves vulnerability.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, I don't know, do you have your customer base? Is it mostly in England, or is there outside of it, like in Europe, or do you have customers across the ocean, or?
So my one-to-one coaching is mainly in the UK and also a few in the United States. Oh. My group coaching and kind of self-taught courses that people take themselves through, right, throughout the world. I've had people from at least 4 continents on my group coaching programs.
Wow. So what would you find, I've heard a lot of I guess I want to say stories, but I've had some guests previously on my show that are from the United Kingdom, and a lot of common things that they say is that the people in the United Kingdom are less willing to discuss or reveal certain things, like emotionally or vulnerability, about being vulnerable about their issues, because society is more reserved, they're less emotional, and they really present that, I know, in fantasy and TV a lot of times as well. But they even said themselves that in the UK, people are not as willing to discuss it because it's not something that they feel is open. They're not as open to it as in the US or in Canada, for example.
Yeah, there's definitely something in that. I hope it's changing. It certainly used to be the case that, Brits, we have a stiff upper lip. We don't tell anybody what
Yeah.
we're feeling and we just muddle on through. Which, of course, if that's your attitude, it's going to be really hard for you to seek help and admit that help could be beneficial.
Yeah.
Um, but I think a more American attitude is kind of crossing the pond in a way, and people are starting to realize, hey, we've got these things called feelings, and that's allowed.
That's great. Yeah. I know, because it's awful. Like you said, it's extremely difficult to make any kind of progress and get any real help and improve your life if you're not really willing to express your fears or your concerns with someone, because until you can do that, you can't really make much progress at all, because that's one of the keys to getting better and making progress with anything, not just like learning to cope with ADHD or trauma. Is you have to be able to be vulnerable and trust that person and express your thoughts and your feelings to them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, difficult problems aren't solved by individuals working alone.
Yeah.
Difficult problems are solved by multiple people with different strengths working together. I have a coach myself because I have my blind spots and I need somebody who's not in my situation to be able to gently reflect things back to me to help me
Right.
become more self-aware. We all do.
Absolutely. Yeah, of course. Even the experts have their help, because not nobody. I don't think there's anybody out there that knows everything. Like there's and they have their own. I think there's very few people out there that don't have some kind of an issue that they need assistance with, because they can't do it by themselves. So yeah. Wow. Okay. So in your day to day, like when you're helping these people with ADHD, like what would be okay? Let's say it's their first day, and so they've been introduced to you, and they're starting this process. What would you start them with, and how do you introduce your coaching, and what makes it easy for them, or hopefully would be easy for them?
Yeah. So the first session is always on goal setting. So I'm teaching a specific goal setting methodology. We're exploring what the goals are, and we're beginning to start that relationship. Because typically, people don't want to tell all of their deepest secrets to somebody that they've met once. And so the
Yeah.
first couple of sessions I find need to be sort of fairly safe feeling, in the sense of a little bit surface.
Right.
The real deep work relies on a foundation of trust that isn't built in an instant. So goal setting is kind of practical enough that it feels safe. It's useful because I've got a specific way that I do it that works for people with ADHD. So then my clients take that skill away and they can go and set their own goals in the future. And I'm beginning to get to know what's important to somebody, but it's not like, what are your deepest neuroses? It's, where do you see yourself 3 months from now? It's fairly
Right.
concrete.
So make it easier for them, because obviously, yeah, like you said, they need to learn and feel that they can trust you as a person and as a coach. So then they'll be able to eventually open up more, and then they make their progress. Well, obviously, every appointment is going to have progress. It's just that they have to get to that point where they can open up and be vulnerable and be able to tell you information, so that you can start to really get into the root of it, and help them get there where they need to go.
Yeah. So the first session is always goal setting. The second session is often on routines. Again, like, it's really practical. Loads of us need help with routines. There are
Yeah.
specific techniques to do routines that are different if you have ADHD and you don't have ADHD, right? There's kind of general advice on routines is probably not going to be very helpful for someone with ADHD. But again, it's still, it's the everyday. It's that sort of, we know what we're talking about and it's not too scary. And then after that, we might start to go more into, where finding out actually where are the real issues, where are we going to do the real work.
Yeah. Interesting. Absolutely. And that's definitely a good way of starting. Myself, I think that would be how I would want to start, because you don't, I think even if it was like you're going to a therapist for trauma, you're not going to say, this is what happened to me back in the day, and tell them everything, because they need to gain their client's trust, their patient's trust, so that they'll feel comfortable and open to be able to share what's happened and share their emotions and feelings. And so it's the same among every sort of profession. It doesn't happen immediately. Yeah.
Yeah. It takes time to build that relationship. Yeah. And it can vary. If somebody wants to say on session 2, actually what I really need to work on is this, then okay, great. Well, I'll follow that lead.
Absolutely.
But I'm not going to pressure somebody too early on in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is obviously a smart way to go. So is there anything that you do when you have clients? Is there something that you find works really well, like compared to maybe other coaches that you find is a really good method or a really good way of showing them that you're going to be helpful, you're going to be very easy to follow, easy to trust? Like what do you do that would be different?
Yeah, so my coaching program is more structured than traditional coaching. Traditional coaching is more of so what do you want to talk about today? Which I haven't found helpful for myself or for my clients, because we know what we need to talk about, but it's not at the front of our mind. And when somebody asks that open-ended question, it doesn't help us connect to what we want to talk about. It just makes us feel like we're under pressure and our thoughts disappear, and now it's kind of awkward, which isn't building trust. Whereas I find if I say like, oh, we're talking about psychological safety today, how do you create a culture of psychological safety as a leader, then people go, oh, that reminds me of this thing that I need to talk about. Once the conversation is happening, ADHDers are very connective thinkers. We can connect in what we need from the conversation to what's being said, but we don't like to start, I've found, from nothing.
Absolutely. Yeah, building up is a good way of making progress, because it's a lot to handle for anyone, let alone ADHD, like someone who has ADHD, and especially if they struggle with focus and attention, like if that's one of their main areas that they really have a problem with, it can make it more difficult to follow along. And it might even possibly hold them back a little bit and maybe slow it down, because I know for myself, it's easy to become distracted, and suddenly, without realizing it, you might miss like a quarter or a third of the conversation and not necessarily know what's been said. And they might be kind of embarrassed or shy to admit that they've missed something or that they got distracted. So again, that's kind of like that trust aspect, that if they're open to saying to you, oh shoot, I got distracted, I'm sorry, I missed something. If they're not willing to do that, it can be a bit of a struggle at first.
Yeah, and one of the other things that I do with my program is I give my clients resources, so a workbook with kind of prompts to help them put into practice what we're talking about, and videos of me explaining the parts that I need to explain. So if they miss something, forget something, right? I've got really awful working memory, and a lot of other people with ADHD do too.
Yeah.
So it's there as that reference to look back to.
Okay. Excellent. Now, do you have let's say it's the first session again, and do you have a very clear set of expectations that you put ahead, like saying, okay, like trying to show or give them the ability to really feel as relaxed and to not feel pressure? Because I know that sometimes people don't know what is going to happen, or they don't really know what to expect. So do you really kind of put it all like at the front and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. And don't worry about if you forget something, or it's okay. Like, to try to put them at ease so that they don't feel like they have to be absolutely 100% focused or concentrating on you, like shut everything off. Is there something that you help them out so that when they start, they're not thinking, oh my God, I gotta be so in tune and ready to go and not worry about anything?
Yes, so I send an email with sort of expectations and a bit of information, so they will know that the first session is going to be on goal setting. They'll know where to access the material, because for a few people, they really want to like see what we're going to talk about ahead of time to feel that kind of sense of reassurance. Like most of my clients don't sort of watch it as homework ahead of time, but a few do find that reassuring. So that's available. But I'm wondering like what else I could do, because it is a very anxious time, that first session, I think. So
Absolutely.
yeah, wondering.
Yeah. That's good. Like, I know, because it's so common for people, like ADHD, it just, there's, if they have a lot of like friends, or if they have coworkers or a manager that makes them feel nervous or like anxious because maybe they don't want to necessarily tell them about it, or they're worried, like they go to work and or school, like university, and they go and they're very nervous because they haven't necessarily told anybody that they have ADHD. So they're trying their best to be normal. They're trying their best to be able to focus and to take notes and to fully be attending or attentive to the class. It's so hard to be feeling comfortable and to feel relaxed and to not allow their minds to just wander and get, because especially with ADHD, it can go so fast, and it can get really kind of out of hand awful quick. So giving them that sense of understanding and that those expectations ahead of time, and that no pressure, or that no, like, don't worry about this. Don't worry. It's not something that we're going to expect you to be able to handle or to do or to know right away. It really gives them that ability to be calmer and not, because, well, ADHD, we're gonna automatically have that sense of panic sometimes if we feel like it could get out of hand awful fast.
Yeah, and I do have tools that I can use with clients to help them regulate themselves if things have got out of hand, if they've been really vulnerable and shared maybe something that's really difficult and they've become a bit triggered in that process.
Yeah.
Then we can kind of take a breath and do some exercises to just calm that nervous system back down before we kind of move on, because coaching is all about the future, what's happening now and how that impacts the future. So it's not like a lot of therapy is digging into, why is it like this? But if something comes up and has triggered someone, I don't find it kind or helpful to sort of pretend they're not triggered and keep going regardless.
Yeah.
I think there's got to be that moment of acknowledgement and Yeah, regaining that emotional regulation or that nervous system regulation before you're then ready to kind of go back to talking about what you're going to do next.
Right. So before you, like, at the beginning of the session, and I'm not necessarily the first or the second, but I'm saying, like, down, like, you've been doing multiple sessions. Is there a routine that you tend to run at the very beginning or even at the end of the session to kind of start like a breathing method, a tool, a grounding method, something that you use to help with focusing, or to have a good start to the session so that it's as productive as possible? Is there anything that you do?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I've actually been just thinking about adding this in, or especially for like the group programs, so that everybody can kind of come into that space together. Yeah, and start off with something like that. With one-to-one, it tends to be more of a just a check-in. Is there anything that you want to share, or do you want me to dive in, see where we're at? Just that permission for people to tell me if there's stuff going on, but no obligation. Like,
Right.
if you don't want to tell me how you are, you don't have to. We don't have to do like that chit chat, because I know sometimes people don't want to do that chit chat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good. I know that for myself that would be an excellent way to do a start, or even if it's in the middle of a session too, to kind of do a check-in. I know that my therapist occasionally checks in with me to see how my state is, because I know that talking about something, especially if it's a very tense or serious situation or example that I'm talking about, he wants to make sure that I'm feeling, that I'm okay, I'm grounded, and I'm not like anxious. Like, he wants me to be able to be grounded and feel calm, to keep a level mind instead of it. So do you see that often, where they just start to go and they just and you can tell that there's like a level of excitement's really starting to build up, or they're getting tense, or maybe they're starting to get triggered a little bit? Like, do you have anything that you use, or like, I know you do the at the beginning where you check in, but just so that people, in case they're getting a little overexcited, or maybe they're starting to feel that tenseness or that anxious feeling.
Yeah. So it's interesting, as you're talking about it, I could see a little bit more tension in you, I think.
Yeah.
So it's about reading body language where possible, and just kind of knowing, is this a good avenue to push on, or do we need to ease back? Partly it's that. And you talked about kind of excitement and being triggered. For me, it's quite different. So if somebody's like enthusiastic and they're sharing a lot and they're really interested in this, maybe it's a special interest, I wouldn't really see that as a problem.
Okay.
I would have an eye on kind of how much time is left and what I need to say. And I might, okay, but can we bring it back to the topic? But usually, as long as space and time allows, I let people run with what they're interested
Right.
in. If they're triggered, it's different though. Then it would be like, okay, I can see that thinking about that brings up some feelings for you. You don't need to tell me about that event that happened. Actually, we're focused more on the here and now. What can you see in the room around you? That kind of thing. I've been told I
Right.
have a soothing voice. So I think sometimes if I'm talking instead of kind of questioning, that can just help people to settle for a moment.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I know that the one thing I have a problem with is I get so into the topic that I'm discussing, that it I drown out everybody else, and there's always that importance of allowing other people to have their word, or to say their piece, or get into the, like, instead of it being a one-sided conversation, it try to have a shared conversation where everybody gets to talk about it, and you have to, you say what you want to say, and then you need to change and listen to what they're talking about so that everybody kind of shares. Some people do that where they don't, they get so going that it's like if you let them go, they could go forever. And
we verbally process often with ADHD, and it's not appropriate in a lot of situations. So I'll teach my clients, don't verbally process in the big meeting with all your senior leaders. They're not going to appreciate that. But we do verbally process, and that's an important tool for us to use. And I think in a coaching session is often an appropriate time for a client to be verbally processing, because it's not an equal, we should each input into the conversation equally. It's a space for the client. And if them talking through things is helping them increase their understanding of what they're going to do next, that for me, that's a good result.
Absolutely. Yeah, I guess I think part of it is I don't know, have you had a lot of clients that maybe they have a partner or maybe they've got a boss or a coworker that is telling them you talk a lot, or you're always talking? Like, do they kind of sense, or not sense, but can you sense in them where there's a bit of hesitation, or because of the past where people are always telling them you just talk too much, you don't let other people talk, you're always in your head? Do you notice some of the times where they bring that out and they say, I'm scared to talk. I want to express myself, but I always been told that it's too much, and I don't share the topic, or I'm not listening to anybody. Is there anything that you tell them or show them that to guide them along? Because I know eventually it gets to the point where it's almost like trauma related, because they instead of now talking, it holds them back because they realize that their ADHD is kind of getting in the way of their friendship or their relationship or their work.
So some people talk a huge amount because they want to feel in control, and they are scared that if they stop talking, somebody else is going to talk, and they can't predict what that person is going to say. And that is terrifying. So they just talk and they fill all of the space. Maybe that's familiar. And, but that's a symptom of a problem. So I don't want to be like addressing the symptom, like you have 30 seconds to talk and now it's gone and you must be quiet, because that's not addressing the problem. And the problem is getting more comfortable with the unexpected, having that sense within yourself that actually you're an adaptable human being who is a creative problem solver, who will manage to respond to whatever the other person says if you just give them a chance. That failure is not defining of you as a person. You can say the wrong thing to somebody and be forgiven and try again next week and make amends, because we can have this binary thinking where if I say the wrong thing, like that's the end of the world and I'm now a terrible person. So it's breaking out of that. And then as a result, people will start allowing more space in the conversation for others. But that's not where I'm working. I'm working on the root, and then that happens because we don't want more shame associated with you're talking too much. We've all had those negative voices. I don't want to be adding to them. I want to be addressing why that's happening.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Now, you mentioned earlier about working memory, and that's a very common affliction and issue with people who have ADHD, especially people who are inattentive. I know for myself, I do have an issue, and it can be very glaring sometimes where I I'm working on something, or I have a plan to work on something, and it takes nothing for me to forget about it. Or and then you're standing there and you look like you're confused because I'm trying to think, what was I going to do? I'm trying to remember what I was doing. I had a plan, and then it just you can't get it back. And I know this is a very common thing with a lot of people because their executive functioning is not very good, and so it affects so many things. What is there any method or like training or anything that you have or that you've shown your clients to help? Like, I know there's adaptations. I know you can do reminders, you can do calendars, you can do notes. There's all sorts of things that you can do to help. But the biggest thing I've noticed is it's in the moment, that moment that you're doing something and you forget. It's that habit of remembering to make the note, to make the reminder, because you're so busy doing your work or doing that task that you say to yourself, yeah, okay, I will make a reminder, or I'm going to make sure I do that, but then you forget. And I'm sure that's what a lot of people are having issues with, is they know that they can do these things, they can adapt, but it's that remembering to do that. It's that building that habit of, oh yeah, I got to make sure I make this note. I've got an appointment, or I want to clean the garage, or I want to vacuum the upstairs room. I got to make sure I make a note. But they're doing something in that they're working, or there's a, like they're really focused on something, and it's that building that habit of taking that moment to make the reminder or make that adaptation work. What do you think? Is there something that you notice? Is it just is it like routine, or is it what gets in that way? Because
Routine is some of it. Minimizing interruptions is some of it. So that's the moment that we forget, right? It's when the ping comes up, you've got a new email, and then you forget what you're doing and you move to attend to that. So turn off those notifications so you have fewer interruptions. I was curious with the examples you were giving. Some of those didn't sound like super critical things to me. Some of
right.
those sound like things that I would maybe allow myself to forget if I was super focused on something else. And then it'll probably come back to me at another time. Maybe it won't. Maybe the garage will stay untidy. Maybe that's not the end of the world.
Yeah, okay. I guess, see, I have a difficult time. Like, it's getting better. Like, I'm on a couple different medications. One's for ADHD and other one's for anxiety, but together they've really helped. It's just there are still moments where, I guess, for example, I'm cleaning the dishes at the end of the night, and I forget one or two dishes. It's not right there in front of me. It's kind of off to the side, and I'm so focused on it that I see it and I think to myself, yeah, okay, I'll get it, I'll take care of it. But then I finish up what I'm doing and walk away, and then it sits there and it sits there overnight or sits there for a day. And
Yeah.
I keep saying to myself, oh shoot, right, I have to remember to do that. It's just, in that moment, I'm not sitting there going, okay, and grab my notepad and write down. It's
Yeah.
that thought of it.
I think it really helps to have a specific example, because I don't think it's like a one size, this is how we solve it. I think this is what
Yeah.
coaching's about. It depends on the individual and their
Right.
individual
Yeah.
problem. So in that case, I would think it is about routine. I would suggest that at the end of your washing up, you need to add a step to the routine, which is like check the places where dishes hide out,
Yeah.
so that you're not kind of marking it as done until you've done that check. You could even write out a physical checklist. and laminate it and get a whiteboard pen and be like, I've done step one, I've done, so that you know that you haven't missed any steps. So you're not having to remember each dish each time. You're just going through a process which will ensure that you get all of the dishes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's a physical tool that you're using to help. It's like an adaptation. It's one of the that's a method that would clearly work, and that would be so beneficial for not just for myself, but for anyone who does have that hard time of multitasking. Now, I know that some of the research that I've done, a lot of people are recommending to get into a habit of only thinking about one thing at a time. Do that work. When that work's done, then move on to the next. Don't think about, or if something pops into your mind, don't attach to it. Don't continue with it. Let it go away, and or write it down or something. But build that habit of continuing to do what you're doing currently, rather than, oh, right, I have to take the garbage out. And then so you take the garbage outside, and next thing you know, you're looking in the yard and something distracts you.
Yeah.
And 3 hours
Tomorrow
later,
you find
you're
the
back
dishes
at,
in the sink.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
know, like, there's so many different ways, and everybody's a little different.
Yeah. But I think you're right that you want to kind of stay on what you're on, but you want to feel like it's safe to stay on what you're on. So the routine or the checklist is giving you that safety. It's saying you can forget about that dish because you have a process that will take care of it. And so then it's easier to let that thought go because you don't need it.
Yeah. Absolutely. It doesn't sit there and constantly push and remind you or distract you. Absolutely. Huh. That makes so much sense. Now, I don't know how many people you've seen since you've started, so I'm assuming you've seen quite a few people. Of all those that you've seen, what would you say is the one or maybe the two problems that seem to always come up, that you notice is a very common issue that just keeps happening, like more than anything else?
I think for me, the fundamental thing that keeps coming up and up and up is we don't have a good connection to ourselves. We're not in tune with what we really want and what we really need. And if we do manage to identify it, we too easily label things as wants when they're actually fundamental to our happiness. So encouraging people to get to know themselves better, know what they want, and believe that they deserve those things. For me, that's the real heart. People normally come in saying something like, I'm a little bit disorganized, I've missed some deadlines, can you help me with that? And it's like, yeah, okay, sure, but what's under there? Because actually nobody's like most pressing problem in their life is that they're a bit disorganized.
There's more to it. Yeah, absolutely. That's very true. I know that was actually not that exact example, but yeah, I had that issue too, where I thought it was something very simple, but like I forget every time I get up in the morning and I'm trying to get to work, I'm like almost like I'm running like a chicken with its head cut off because I can't remember where this is, where that is, and I thought, oh, that's my biggest problem, right? Like that's what I always deal with. And then you realize after some investigating or someone else helping, showing you, well, there's more to it than just, not being well organized and not planning out your the beginning of your day too well. There's so much more to it, and you soon learn that because you've got that poor working memory and you got that executive function that just doesn't work right, that you have that prone tendency to to put things down where they don't belong, and you forget that that's where you put it, and that entire day goes by and you go to bed and you don't even realize, you have no idea that this is important for you the next day. So your keys are missing and your phone is somewhere, and your lunch bag is off in the corner, and they don't realize that there's so much, you can go so deeper into that and discover that, yeah, this is your cause, this is why, and then it helps them to understand, and then they can learn to, whether it's building a routine or having like adapting that, okay, you go to bed at night, make sure that you're prepared, make sure that everything that you need is in a spot, has a designated location, build a habit of always putting it in the same spot every time. Don't just put it down. If, unless that's where it's going to be, like if that's where it's supposed to go, don't put it there. It's not as simple as just, oh yeah, I keep forgetting my keys.
Yeah, and with that example, I think what it illustrates that we often think we should be better at doing things the neurotypical way, when the reality is we need to accept that way is not the right way for us and just find a different way. So, maybe there are people in your life going, I just remember where my keys are. You just need to remember where your keys are. It's not that hard. But like, it is that hard. It's pretty much impossible. It's not going to happen. It's not a matter of willpower. It's a matter of acknowledging, I can't remember where I put my keys. How can we problem solve? Well, I guess if I always put them in the same place, I don't have to remember because they're always going to be there.
Exactly. Yeah. 100%. Now, when you're working with your clients and you've been with them for a while, like, is there any sort of like program, like, okay, let's say like an organizing or an organizer, or let's say a physical calendar or something that you can teach them or show them to use, that is, because they say that visual reminders are really good, because we have a tendency that, I think the word is out of sight, out of mind. Like if things are hidden, or if we put something away, there's that good chance that we're going to forget, or we're not even going to remember or even think about it. So if we have stuff in front of us that says, here's your day to day, this is what you're doing, or this is where this is, or this is what you're, do you find that, is there anything that you show them or that you build or teach them that they can use? Like, how do you help them with that kind of thing?
I think, again, it is quite individual, because it's not just out of sight, out of mind. It's
right.
If it's not interesting, I'm not going to think about it. Like, it could be right behind your computer and you could see it every day, but after a week, you're going to tune it out if it's not relevant and interesting to you. So sometimes we have to change tools, because sometimes we just get really bored of something and it stops working and we have to change to something new. So I'm not attached to any particular tool. It's the principles that I want my clients to understand. So, the principle is, if you don't write down your appointments somewhere, you will forget half of them. Like, I know that's true in my experience, and it's true in yours as well. So
absolutely.
Where is going to be the most convenient place for you to write your appointments down in the moment that you're making them? Because the less friction there is, the more likely you are to use the tool. And how are you going to remember to check it? And it doesn't matter what the tool is. I have a big desk calendar because I do like the physical and the visual. I also have a calendar on my phone because that's with me at all times. I don't necessarily recommend that duplication, but it depends on the individual.
Right. Absolutely. That's extremely important. I agree. Like, I just know personally that you make a good point about the if it's interesting or not. Like, it's true, because there are times in my own life where something that is extremely important or is really interesting, it's so much easier to remember, to make the point of making reminders, or to tell yourself later on that day, hey, remember you're doing this. But then the opposite, if it's like, oh, I really don't want to do this, but I know I have to, you're so much more likely to forget, because it's almost like you're mentally making that choice. Like you're saying, I am purposely hoping to forget, in a way, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, our
yeah,
brains are interest driven. So if there's no interest, our brain is going to be like, it's
yeah,
not a conscious choice.
no.
Yeah.
So do you, okay, so I know that they say that the big thing that always seems to affect people is dopamine, like, because obviously with ADHD there's that issue with the, like, maintaining, like, the dopamine hits, you get that, but it only lasts, it's not like it's permanent, like you have it and then eventually it wears off because you get used to something, and the interest starts to wane and it starts to fall. So do you have anything that you use to teach your clients to, like, to freshen it up, or to keep things interesting, or to change? Because I know routines obviously are going to get boring to some people. What do you recommend for them to kind of keep things interesting so that they don't lose the interest, they adjust, like, always make it, like, changing it up so that it's always interesting?
Yeah. So for example, a lot of people want to start an exercise routine. So what I would say then is the routine should be pockets of time when you intend to exercise, but you get to choose what you do in that time. You might be really into cycling and go cycling every week for 3 months and then decide that you hate it and start alternating yoga with rock climbing. Like, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter what you're doing. If you keep that time to do something, you've got that balance of routine and flexibility.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting way of doing it, because I know there's a lot of people out there that it's almost like they think there's an obligation to continue doing that. And I think the best example is the New Year's resolutions, right? Like, it's the beginning of the year. I'm gonna change the way I eat. I'm gonna exercise more. I'm gonna start a new hobby. And even people who don't even have ADHD, it only lasts for a few weeks, or maybe a few days, and they just don't want to do it anymore because they find it too difficult, right? And so I'm imagining someone with ADHD finding a new hobby. It's so exciting and it's so fun, and they say, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna do this all the time," and then it just, a month later, 2 months later, it's like, where's that new hobby that you were doing? Uh, I'm not interested anymore. It's not the same. It doesn't, like, there's that, they lose that right away. So, like, is your method is actually really interesting. Because it doesn't make them feel obligated to always have that routine, or that exact hobby, or that task that they have to do every single time. I like that method because it allows them a variety, and it keeps it fresh for them. Yeah,
Right.
that's
Was there
interesting.
anything else, or
Um, yeah, just one more question. Actually, yeah, I've been thinking about this. Who, like, what made you want to become a coach, like an ADHD coach? What was your inspiration to do that?
Sure. So I worked in tech for a bit over a decade. Very successful, set up a team, all of that stuff. But it wasn't really making me happy. It was kind of making me a bit burnt out. And so I impulsively quit my job and decided to
Hmm.
become a coach. Huh, surprise, surprise. At this point, I didn't know I had ADHD, right? So I just decided to become
Ah,
a coach in general. And a couple of women in my area came to me and said, we've been diagnosed with ADHD and we've been told we should have an ADHD coach, but we don't really know what that is. And also, there aren't any. This was pre-pandemic when everybody was working face to face as well. And
Yeah.
there literally weren't any in my area. So they said, well, will you help us? And I was like, a new challenge, an interesting thing to learn. Yes, let's do this.
Nice.
And I kind of, through the reading that I did to support them and working with them, basically the penny dropped. So I was like, okay, right, I have ADHD. And so I changed what I was doing and focused much more specifically then on ADHD.
Excellent. Well, that's fantastic. It's like now, are there a lot of them in your area, or are you kind of like that where there aren't too many options available for someone, or is like for ADHD
Well,
coach?
nowadays people can see any coach anywhere in the world, right?
Yeah.
I work almost exclusively online, so that there still aren't many options in my area. I mean, I think there's a shortage in general, but
Yeah.
people,
That's true.
it's much easier now for people to find the person that's a good fit for them. They don't just have to find the person who is closest to them.
Absolutely. That's good. So you obviously really enjoy like the help that you give out and the advice. Is there anything that you take away from it? Like the different clients that you have, what do you take away from it that helps you?
I mean, like so many of us, I want to feel useful in that my work is changing somebody's life. And because that then ripples out, doesn't it? When I really work deeply with a client, that impacts on their family, on their colleagues, and
Yeah.
out into the wider community. And for me, it's more meaningful for me to work with somebody I know. Whereas before, when I was in tech, maybe I was producing, for example, I worked on fraud detection. Like, fraud is bad, detecting fraud is good, but you never meet the people who were
Yeah.
impacted by that. You can never say, this is Sally and she wasn't defrauded because your software did its job. And so, that for me, coaching just feels much more impactful in a tangible way.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. It'd be nice if there were more coaches out there, because with the short, like you say, there's a shortage. It does make it difficult for someone trying to find a coach that's suitable, because I know personally there are coaches out there that handle ADHD and trauma together as like an actual method, and then there are ones that just focus on ADHD. So it's awful difficult to get a suitable coach that really helps them, that they feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and so I'm pretty much fully booked at the moment, but I have a group
yeah,
program that's starting in September, and that's a great way for people who are maybe just starting to realize that they need help to commit
yeah,
in a less intensive way than working one to one, and get some really excellent tips and support.
awesome. Well, that's great. Everything today, like we talked about, was extremely informative and really helps not only myself, but I'm sure my audience is going to get a great deal of insight from what's been said today. I would love to see that video, and I will definitely share your website with my audience, because I do have quite a few people who are from the United Kingdom that actually listen to my show. So anything to help them would be incredibly beneficial to them, I'm sure. Okay, excellent. Well, thank you, Anna, for coming on my show. This was really good, and I got so much out of this, and I'm sure my audience is going to get a lot out of this as well. So thank you for coming on.
Great. Well, it's been really nice to get to know you. little bit.
Yeah,
thanks
absolutely.
So much for having
Same
me.
here. Yeah. All right, everybody. That's it for this episode. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask, either myself or Anna, and I can, of course, relay them to Anna, you can get a hold of me. There's Twitter, which is at ADHD and CPTSD. There's my email address, livingwithadhdandcptsd and cptsd@gmail.com. All right, everyone. I hope this was an informative episode for everybody in my audience, and I will talk to you next time. All right. Bye, everyone.